Hey there mini wargamers, welcome to Seasick Pirate Studios. My name is Curtis and in this episode I'm going to be painting a Necron Overlord. Necron Overlords are the most powerful leaders of the Necron species. At a Necron Overlord's command are countless legions of Necron warriors, terrifying war machines, and a devastating array of weapons to help aid them in their quest of becoming the most powerful race in the galaxy once more. In this video today, I'll be painting a Necron Overlord from the Indomitus box set. I'll be painting him in classic metal and green colours. So without further ado, grab your paints, grab your brushes, and let's get started. So here we have our Necron Overlord, or Jimhoteph as I like to call him. And as you can see, I've undercoated him with matte black from Colourforge. Now for the first step, I'm going to focus on painting all of the metal. So this covers 90% of the model, so I'm going to use lead belcher and my medium base brush. So I've got some lead belcher on my palette just here. I've watered it down a tad, and what I'm going to do is just get some on the end of my brush. What you want to do is just paint this over all the armour, all the weapons, all these shoulder pads here. Now when you are painting, just be careful of these hoses at the back and these tabards on the front, as you don't want to snap them. So you just want to be a little bit soft around those areas. Now that the base has dried, we're going to move on to the next step and apply an all-over wash of Necron oil. So this will bring out all the detail and give the model a nice worn, dirty look. So I've got my medium shade brush. I've got some Necron oil on my palette. I'm just going to load my brush up nice and generously, and we're just going to paint this all over the entire miniature. So just watch out for pooling in some areas. So just move it around with your brush and make sure you get into all the nooks and crannies. So now the Necron oil has dried all over Jimhoteph and all of the detail is standing out nicely, we're going to dry brush the model to give it a bit of a highlight. So just like the ocean's wet and the sky is blue, when you paint Necrons, you have to do some dry brushing. So I'm going to dry brush Ironbreaker all over the miniature. So I've got some on my palette. I'm just going to get some onto my small dry brush. What we're going to do is get some kitchen towel and just scrub all of this off. So you want next to none on the brush. Just try it on the edge of your hand. There we are. And what you want to do is just very carefully just paint this over the top of all the metal areas. And again on the back, just be careful of all the wires because you don't want to snap those off. So just take your time and just apply a dry brush all over the metal areas. So now that the dry brush of Ironbreaker is complete, we're now going to move on to the last step of the armour and give it a highlight of Runefang steel. So I've got some of this on my palette. What I want to do is get my fine detail brush and just get some on the end, and what you want to do is just go around all the edges of the joints on the inside of the rib cage. You want to try and keep your lines nice and thin as well. and just give those areas a nice highlight, like that. And all of the dents in the armour, just paint around the edges of those just to make them stand out. So just take your time, steady hand, and then we can move on to the next step. So after our highlight of Runefang steel, all the armour is now complete, and we're going to move on to all of the gold parts. So I'm going to be painting all of these tabards down here. I'm going to be painting the tabard in between his legs, and I'm also going to be painting all of these collarbone and chest crest just here. And I'm going to be painting those with Retributor armour. So I've got some here on my palette, I've watered it down. Just going to get my regiment brush, and what we're going to do is just paint this all over those areas. Just get a nice gold colour on those areas. So you might need a couple of coats of this just to build a decent block colour. So wait for the first layer to dry and then apply a second one. So after a couple of layers of Retributor armour all over the gold areas, I'm now going to apply a shade of Reikland Flesh Shade. So I've got some here on my palette. I'm just going to get some all over my brush, and we're just going to paint this all over those gold areas just to give them some nice shade and get some definition in all of the recess areas. So just keep an eye out for pooling, especially around these parts on the collarbones and the crest in the middle. We don't want to apply too much. So if you feel like you have, just dry your brush off and just soak up some of the wash, like that. So now that the Reikland Flesh Shade has dried all over the gold areas, we're now going to dry brush them with Liberator Gold. So I've got some Liberator Gold on my palette. I'm going to dip my dry brush into there. I'm going to work it into all the bristles. And what we're going to do is just scrub this off with a piece of kitchen towel, just like we did with the silver earlier on for the armour. So just check it on your wrist. There we go. And what you want to do is just be careful of all of the metal areas and just drag this all over those gold areas. Now this will give them a highlight, and it will take the edge off the gold and soften it down a bit. So just take your time, go around all the gold areas. Even the crown on the top of his head. Just want to catch all those edges. Just like that. As you can see, it's given it a nice highlight. So after our dry brush of Liberator Gold, all of the gold areas are now complete, and we're now going to move on to all of the green areas. So I'm going to be painting the blade, I'm going to be painting the back of the blade here as well. I'm going to be painting all of this part round to the shoulders here, and I'm going to be painting all of the power modules and all the nodes and his eyes as well. Now to start this off, we're going to use Caliban Green. So I've got some here on my palette, and what we're going to do is water it down, and we're just going to paint this all over the blade. I'm going to paint this all over the shoulder areas as well. And we just want to be careful of all the metal areas that we don't want to be green. So just take your time and apply 2 thin coats to get a nice solid colour, because we don't want any of that silver or any of the undercoat to show through. So now that all the Caliban Green areas are now dry, we're going to give them a recess wash of Nuln Oil. So I've got some here on my palette. I'm just going to get some on the end of my brush. And what we want to do is just paint this into all of the recesses on the blade. I want to do this all over the shoulder pads as well. So all these areas in here. And again, you might want to go over these again once the first layer is dry, just to make those lines really stand out. So just take your time around all those recesses and just drop that Norn oil into all those parts that need shading. So now that the Norn oil has dried in all the recesses of the weapon and the shoulder pads, we're now going to move on to the next step, and we're going to complete the blade by doing an effect a little bit like this one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush some Warpstone Glow. I'm going to start at this point just here, just before the end of the blade, and we're going to work our way down just before the end here. So I've got some Warpstone Glow on my brush. I've got some kitchen towel, and what we're going to do is just scrub all of this off. Just going to get a bit more on there. Just going to scrub all of this off. And what I'm going to do is start just here. And what I'm going to do is slowly start building that green up on the blade. So we want to make sure we go all over. So we want to start just before the tip of the blade, and we want to finish just before the tip on the bottom, just there. And we're going to do the same method for all of the power nodes as well, and we're going to do the middle of the cables to build up that nice green glowing energy. So keep building this colour up until you get a nice fading transition, and then we can move on to the next step. So after dry brushing Warpstone Glow all over the blade and all over the power nodes at the back and on the insides of the cables here, we've got a really nice glow effect going on, but we're going to take that a step further, and we're going to do the same with Moot Green. So I've got some on my dry brush. Just going to do the same as we did last step, just scrub all of that off. Got a small dry brush. Okay, that should do. And what you want to do is focus this dry brush inside the one we've just done. So if you start just here, just start dry brushing that on like that. We're going to work our way down the blade to about here. What you want to do is just focus on the inside of that inside that dry brush, and you just want to apply that so we've got a nice transition going into the centre of the blade. You want to do the same with all of your power nodes as well. You want to do the same with all the cables, being very careful not to snap those. That's another count for the careful count. And you want to go on the power module on the inside of this weapon here, or shield, or whatever it is. Let me know what it is in the comments. Let's focus on the blade at the bottom, near his foot as well, just like that. And we want to do the power nodes at the back as well. So just take your time, just dry brush inside the previous one that you've already done, and we'll get a nice glowing effect, and then we can move on to the next step. So after a dry brush of Moot Green, that glow is really coming along. So for the next step, we're going to do a 50-50 mix of Moot Green and White Scar, and this is going to be our final dry brush. Now the blade looks really cool as it is, but what we're going to do is focus this mainly over the power nodules here. We're going to do it all over the back power nodules as well, and we're going to do it in the middle of the pipes, just to get that nice glow. So I've got my dry brush just here. Going to get some of the 50-50 mix onto the end of my brush here, and just like before, we're going to scrub that off with a kitchen towel. Just like that. We don't want too much on our brush here, so just like that. And what we're looking to do is just dry brush this very lightly over the top of the previous highlight. So we're going to do the power nodules here. Do on the pipes as well, just being very careful of the cables. And we're going to do the backs just here as well. So I've got some on my brush. And we're just going to dry brush this into the very middle. So just take your time, build up a nice colour, and once you're happy with the results, that's all of those areas complete. So after a dry brush of our 50-50 mix, all of our weapons and power nodules are looking really cool, and all of the cables as well with that green flowing energy look awesome. So for the next step on the blade, we're going to take that 50-50 mix, and what we're going to do is just highlight around all of the edges here. So I've got some on my palette, I've watered it down. What I want to do is not put too much on there. What you want to do is on the very edges, just do a nice line down each of these edges. Now we don't want to apply this too thick, otherwise it will start to look very silly. So if you feel like you've gone on a bit too far, just take your finger and wipe that off. So we're going to go around all of these parts just here. And that'll be the final step on the blade. So take your time, steady hand, use your fine detail brush and work your way around all of those edges. So while I'm painting in all the lines as well, what I'm going to do is give the power nodes a quick glaze of that same mix, just to round off a nice glow. Make it nice and vibrant so it stands out on the tabletop. So to glaze, basically I took the mix and added 2 parts water to 1 part mix, and then just painted this over all of the nodes, and then I'm going to let those dry, and look how colourful they are. So after painting in all of the lines on the blade and painting all of the power modules, we're now going to give them a layer of Lahmian medium. So this is just to tie in all the colours together and make it look nice and flush. So I've got some here on my brush. Again, we don't want to apply too much. And what you want to do is just paint this over the entirety of the blade and all of those power nodes as well, just to tie those colours in together. So if you wanted to see a tutorial on how to paint power weapons, I'll leave a link in the top corner of the screen, and you can see one of my other videos that I've done on many different ways of painting power blades and power weapons. So we're just going to keep layering up this Lahmian medium nice and thinly, and then that should finish off all of the weapons. So now the Lahmian medium has dried, our weapons are now complete and look really cool and look like they're ready to cut down some Primaris Marines. So for the next step, we're going to go around the miniature. I'm just going to paint all the cable here. I'm going to paint all of these wires in the rib cage, and for this I'm going to use Abaddon Black. So I've got some on my wet palette here. I've watered it down a bit, and we're just going to get some onto my brush, and what we're going to do is just paint all of these wires in here just like that, just layer it up. Now you may need 2 coats of this colour just to cover up that silver. So once the first layer is dry, apply a second thin layer. I'm just going to go around here as well. So now that all of the Abaddon Black has dried all over those cables, we're now going to give them a highlight with Corvus Black. So I've got some Corvus Black on my wet palette, got my fine detail brush here. I'm just going to get some on the end, and what we're going to do is just go over all of these ridges of the wire and just highlight each individual one. So after highlighting all of the ridges on the pipes with Corvus Black, those parts are now complete, and we're now going to move on to these parts of the shoulder pads here, and we're just going to give them an edge highlight with Warpstone Glow. So I've got some on my wet palette just here. I'm just going to get some onto my fine detail brush. Now you want to use the very edge of your brush here, and what you want to do is just drag this across all of the lines, just giving these areas a highlight. And remember, if you do make any mistakes, you can always go back over with some Caliban green just to tidy those areas up. After highlighting the shoulder pads, these are all now complete and the miniature is pretty much done. All we need to do now is base him, and then he's ready for the tabletop. My Overlord has been based and he's now ready to lead legions of Necron warriors into battle. The metal and gold areas really complement the scheme, and the highlights show all the battle damage and dents in the armour. The glowing power scythe and power nodes really bring the model to life and will make the mini stand out on the tabletop. Painting this model was simple and fun to do. Using the methods in this video, you'll be able to paint an entire army of Necrons in no time at all. The great thing about Necrons is that although they seem to be 90% metal and gold, there are many different ways to paint them and lots of different schemes to explore. If you found this video helpful, please leave a comment and a picture of your Necron Overlord. I'd love to see the results. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more miniature painting tutorials and hobby related content. Take care, and I'll see you next time.